This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. Welcome to our 3D lavender cake video. We're going to be making this adorable little lavender cake, and our video is going to be broken down into parts. We're going to cover mixing your colors, the bags and tips we're using, the techniques that we're going to use to create these little lavender blossoms or sprigs on our cake, how we put those techniques together, and then we're going to actually work on our cake. So first we'll cover it, we'll mark and draw our stems, then we'll work on things like buds and sepals, and finally we'll place some leaves and some open blossoms. So we're going to get started mixing the lavender color for our cake, and we're going to use several different colors of liquid gel food coloring. I've got royal blue, lemon yellow, coal black, violet, and some neon bright pink. And the first shade that we're going to make is just a very pale kind of sagey green that's going to go over the background of our cake. It's just going to give us a nice little backdrop with a hint of color. So we're just going to use a little bit of that royal blue, lemon yellow, and coal black just to make a nice light shade of green that's just got a little bit of that kind of low chroma feel to it. We're just going to dull it a tiny bit with just a hint of black. So I'm going to start a little more blue than yellow and just a tiny bit of black. And we'll give this a mix around and see what it looks like. And our goal here is to make an uber light shade that just has a hint of color to it, just kind of the idea of green. Think like shades of paint where you're looking at the swatches and that color at the top that's kind of like almost white and just has a touch of pigment to it. That's what we're going for. And I think that's actually going to be nice. It's just a super light shade of green right now, and I'm just going to add just a little more of that black to it, just to dull it a little bit. I want to do that because I want a nice little background for other colors to stand out on, and some of those are going to be more intense. I just want to put a little bit of color in the background, and I think that's going to be beautiful. It's a nice, super light shade of green. So our next color is going to be a darker shade of green. We're going to use this to pipe stems and leaves and little sepals for our lavender plants. And I'm just going to start with a drop of blue into a few ounces of my buttercream. And I'm going to start with just some kind of big specks of that yellow. Just kind of control the amount of yellow because I want to be more blue than yellow. And a nice healthy dose of that black. Because we're going for kind of a sagey forest color. So I don't want too much yellow in there. It's actually looking pretty nice. It's got a nice amount of blue in it. Not too much yellow, and I think it just needs more black. We want it to have that kind of dusty, sage-like, kind of eucalyptus vibe to it. And that's getting it right where we need to be. Just play with your colors until you get shades that you like. And I usually go just a little lighter than what I want the final look to be because they will develop and they will deepen as they sit a little bit. And that's going to be that perfect shade of kind of in between. It's a green, but it's got quite a bit of that gray to it. So it's going to be that nice kind of dusty color. It's fantastic. We'll move on to our purples. So we're going to make two shades of purple. The first one is going to be a lighter one and the second is darker. And we'll start with the light one. I've got just a little bit of purple. And to make it significantly different in tone and feel, I'm going to add just a tiny bit of that pink. Not a lot, just a little bit. And then I'm going to add just a tiny bit of black to these because I want everything to kind of have that heathery feel and vibe to them. And that just might be perfect. It's actually a really beautiful shade. It's nice, it's light, It's a little bit warmer in feel because of the pink we added, and it's got that nice kind of dull, muted, low chroma feel to it because of the black. So it's a nice shade of that really, really light lavender. So I'm just gonna be done with that really quick, and we'll move on to our dark shade of purple. So for our dark purple, we're gonna start with a drop of our violet. So give it a nice big healthy drop, maybe 2. And we're going to add a little bit of the black. And then we're also gonna add a little bit of that royal blue. So we're gonna take this color in the other direction and make it kind of a cool tone versus what we did before with the lighter shade where we added that little bit of pink. This one, a little bit of blue and some black. And that should give us kind of a radically different feel and tone to this purple. And I like where it's going. I think I'm just going to adjust it a little bit because it's just a little bit too blue for me right now. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of that black just to deepen it some, and some more purple to it. But really, I like just having more than one shade when I'm doing lavender plants. So I have some blossoms that are darker and some that are lighter, and it gives it just a little bit more natural tone and feel. So that's nice. I think we just need to bump up the intensity just a touch. And then I think once this color has had time to develop, it'll be a really beautiful shade. So we've got a really nice, like almost dark heather purple going. So this is gonna be great next to our lighter shade and those beautiful greens that we made. It's gonna give our cake an overall kind of muted feel, and it's gonna be just lovely. So let's talk about the bags and tips that we're gonna use for this little lavender cake. We have 3 12-inch disposable decorating bags. I've fitted them with couplers because I'm going to change the tips. And currently I have each of them fitted with a number 3 tips. So you'll probably need 3 of those. If you've only got 1, just keep in mind you'll have to wash it between, right? So with the green, I've got a 3 on it currently, but I am also going to use a number 5 as well. So that's also a round tip, and a number 2. On the purples, I'm going to use the 3s that I have already on there, and then I'm going to switch to a 101. So this is a very tiny little petal tip, right? So I want to have those couplers on there so that I can change those freely and just make a nice natural organic design. For our little lavender cake, there's several different techniques that we're going to use to form different parts of these plants because it's little flowering plants. So we need to do stems, we need to do little sepals underneath the buds, and also the leaves. And we're going to make lines, and we're going to use 3 different size tips for those: the number 2, the number 5, and the number 3. So the number 3 I'm going to use for longer lines for the stems. And normally when I do a line, I'm going to drop it into place if I'm talking about piping on a flat surface. And that would look like this, where I would start, pipe, and allow it to really drop down and give it a really clean finish, right? But when we're doing this on the side of the cake, in order to float your line, you have to go much closer. So you're going to start and just really hover above the surface if we're talking about piping on the side. So we're not doing as large of a pickup there. You can see that still gives us a really nice straight line. And it gives us that really like clean, crisp finish. Sometimes when we're doing lines on the side, especially if we want them to have curves, soft angles, it's actually a little easier just to hold the bag instead of kind of perpendicular to the surface at an angle, and we're going to do kind of a soft drag. You're just barely going to skim the surface, maybe be just hovering right up off of it, and we're going to just float that line, and it's going to be a little easier to do those nice changes in direction and also make tapered ends. Now I got an air bubble, that's not a big deal, you can always go back and fill those in, but this makes a nice soft kind of curving line. It's a little easier to control because you're basically just gently dragging that along the surface. And since we're holding it at an angle like this, the flow of the frosting isn't obstructed and you won't get those kind of little hiccups and kind of weird little spots on your lines. So we'll just show you those, right? So those are the two styles of lines we're going to use. Now for the stems, I'm going to drag so I get nice tapered ends. For things like my little short sepals and stuff like that, where I might want to go under my buds and make just a tiny bit of green coming off with that number 2, I'm going to do my more traditional style lines where I'm just going to put a little short line in there and just tap it in quickly, have a nice defined start and defined finish. So I'm actually going to use both techniques on the sides of the cake. And then for my buds and also my leaves, I'm going to do kind of fat pills, right? So this is where we're taking a bigger tip get that on there. And we're doing a slow pull on the line. And this means that you're allowing that frosting, right? So I'm going to go at an angle because I'm going to be at the side of my cake and I'm just going to follow the angle. And rather than picking up, I'm just going to let it come out slowly and finish it off. So I get a really, really kind of fat, chunky little line there. And lavender has those really kind of almost rounded at the end, pill-like shaped leaves, and they're a little elongated. So this is going to allow us to make nice, fat, elongated oval leaves and also really tiny little buds. So I'm going to do the same thing with my purple, where we just do a slow drag with that opening. To make those little buds. You can see them there, right? So because we used a smaller tip, we get a smaller sized little pill-shaped oval. The other thing I'm going to do for the lavender is switch over to a 101. So I'm just going to take and put that on one of my purple bags. And we're just going to make tiny little petals. So we're going to do this on the side of the cake. Just little petals. And if you do 2 or 3 with a really little tip, you're going to get the idea of some of those little lavender buds opening up and kind of springing open. So we just want to do that kind of here and there just to give it a little dimension, right? Because it'll be something that's kind of more 3-dimensional and coming off the cake. It's going to be very easy to do, and it's a very easy way to practice making petals and also to get used to piping on the side of the cake because it's very small. And we're just doing that kind of normal motion you would do where we go out and come back. So you're literally just drawing a little teardrop shape with that, and it makes those nice little individual petals. We layer 2 in the back and 1 in the front, and you'll get those nice tiny little blossoms that look like those little lavender buds are opening up. So these are the different techniques that we're going to use to create those lavender plants on the side of our cake. So let's talk about building these little lavender plants or blossoms. We're going to start with piping our stems. If you have trouble kind of with layout and you don't want to just go for it on the side, you can always mark the side of the cake with like a toothpick, a barbecue skewer, a cake tester, something that'll give you a little guide to trace when you're piping is always a great suggestion. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to pipe some of those stems long, some of them kind of medium or 3/4 length, and some of them short. Once we get those stems in there, we can go in and pipe our little purple buds. We're usually going to have 1 on the end and a series of them down either side of those stems, maybe some on the top, right? And then we'll go back and add things like our sepals. So we'll switch to a smaller tip and we'll go in there and just put a little green at the base underneath all of those little buds. We can even pull some of them out towards us to give it a little bit more of a 3-dimensional look. And I'll probably go ahead and leave some space on those stems and put some lower down. It often has some clumps of blossoms low down on a stem and then some further up kind of lumped together. And that gives it a little bit more of an organic kind of natural feel. And then the leaves are going to be located down here at the bottom. So right at the bottom of the plant, we'll put in some nice fat leaves just to kind of anchor everything. It'll almost help to create almost a border on the bottom. And Anywhere we feel like it needs a little dimension, we need to draw the eye in, I'm going to change to that 101 tip and put on the occasional three-dimensional little blossom where I'm just piping a few of those little petals, little ruffles, so it looks like some of those buds are starting to open up, right? And you can do them kind of all on the top here, sprinkle down a little less as you get to the bottom, but that's really up to you. So anywhere you want to draw in the eye, you want to create some interest, you want to put in some dimension and texture, it's a great thing to do, and you can do them in both colors and kind of change the tip back and forth. But that's how we're going to use all those techniques, put them together to make these beautiful little lavender plants. So we're getting ready to start working on our cake, and you can see I've got a nice little 4-inch round. I've got it iced in white buttercream. It's nice and hard. It's been in the fridge. We're just going to give it a light coating of that light green frosting that we made earlier. I like to do things this way because I like to put the colors on and just thin layers on the outside. That way, if people like customers or guests are worried about getting their teeth or their tongue stained, it means it's easy for them to kind of eat around, almost the way you can eat around fondant. So I'm just going to go over really quickly and add a light outside layer of this light green buttercream and just a nice, smooth, even layer. And when you're doing this, just start right on the top and then do the sides just like you would when you're normally icing a cake. And if this is a little too much work for you, totally understand. You can just ice the whole thing in light green. You'll just need to make a little bit more. But we're just going to go over this really quickly, add this nice subtle shade to it, and then pop it back in the fridge so that it's nice and firm, which will make it easy to pipe on when we're ready. Just take my bowl scraper go around the sides, and then take any excess off the top. When you're doing this, it might take more than one pass to get that perfect finish, but we're actually looking pretty good already. So we might just be ready to pipe, just clean it up a little bit more. So we just want that nice even layer of that green on the top and the sides, so we have a lovely little background to pipe our lavender blossoms on. So our cake is nice and solid, it's ready to go. We've got that nice even layer of that soft light green on it. I'm just going to take a toothpick and mark right where I want to put my lavender stems, and make sure you leave some space in between them so you have room for things like leaves and buds on both sides of those stems. And we want some of them coming all the way to the top, some of them shorter, right? That's going to be a nice placement. And then you can always do some things like some that just have 2, some more with 3. We'll just go around until we have a nice idea of the placement on our cake. And we want to make sure things don't run into each other and we have a nice kind of overall design. And I've got my number 3 tip on my green bag. I'm just going to go in and then start working on these stems. And I'm going to hold it like I talked about on my tray, where I'm kind of at a 45-degree angle of the cake. The bag is lined up in the direction that I'm going to pull the line, and I'm just going to be dragging softly on the surface, right? So just pick a spot and go. And if you need to slow down a little bit so that your line connects, just adjust your rate. Sometimes when I'm going ahead and just kind of going for it at first, I go a little too quickly. If you get any air bubbles or pops, just go ahead and fill them in, right? Don't worry too much. Those kinds of things are going to happen. And then we'll just keep going. I'm just going to follow those lines I put on there all the way around. And I'm just going to change the direction I'm holding that bag. I'm not going to worry too much about any gaps or air bubbles or bumps because we're going to put a lot of detail on these stems. So I can always go back later and fix it, fill it in. And you can see a little practice, it gets much smoother as you go. There we go. So we've got a nice little all over pattern going. We're going to start working on putting on some buds next. So I have my 2 bags with my purple. They've both got their number 3 tips on them. And I'm going to go ahead and switch my bag with my green to my number 2. That way, as I go in, I do my buds, I can do some sepals as well, and I can just kind of work all the way down. We want to do some little groupings like we talked about. Where we're going to go in, we're going to pipe some little pill shapes, and I'm going to do them in kind of both colors. So I'm going to kind of leave some spots, like if I do dark on this side, I might do light over there. And I just want to imagine where those little groupings are, usually kind of like 3 or 4, right? And then maybe leave a little space. And I might have some a little lower down. So you can see it already has that feel of a lavender plant. And then I'm just going to go in with my light purple and kind of fill in those little gaps. Not all of them have to be the same color. You can create patterns if you want, but I kind of prefer just to do a little here, little there, right? It gets a nice subtle difference. And you can even put some buds directly on top of your stem. So don't be afraid to build up some little layers. That'll build up some depth and give it a little bit more of a realistic look. Once I've done that, I'm just going to go underneath and just put in some little bits of green. So this is where we're drawing some really little lines underneath, right? So rather than dragging, I'm kind of doing that drop placement where I'm just doing those little short lines on either side. Turn the cake so that it's easy, and you can even pull some so that they're coming out towards you. This is going to give it texture and depth as well. And I find it's a little easier if I got any big air bubbles in my stem to go ahead and fix those with that number 2. So I have a little spot down here where there's a gap in my line. And I can just fix that with that number 2 tip, really easy. It's easy to fill any little spots that have air bubbles with that. Right, so I've got a nice look to those buds along there. I'm gonna go ahead and keep working all the way around my cake until I have all my stems that have some nice buds and sepals on them. So we've got all of our little buds on, we've put on some little sepals. You can see I've even done some tiny ones kind of further down from some of those groupings. And we've got a nice kind of vibe, relaxed, swaying in the wind kind of vibe to these little lavender sprigs going. And we're gonna add some leaves to the bottom. And this is just to give them more of that appearance of lavender stalks, of those plants. So we're just gonna add some down at the bottoms of these. So we're just gonna do those nice, fat, oval, slow drawn lines, right? Just to add a little more detail. And I find it's best just to go in with nice, confident strokes. So I always like to start, if I'm a little unsure, on what I consider to be the back of my cake. Get my confidence up and work around towards the front if it's a part that I'm unsure of. So just nice, beautiful, bold lines for those leaves. And you can see it really anchors those plants down at the bottom. Just give them a nice little bit of a soft curve too. Gorgeous. We'll just do one up in the middle there as well. For me, I like to do a little bit, step back, look at it, make sure I like the way things are going, because you can always adjust things and change them up and mix them up a little bit. I like the way this is looking. It just kind of gives some weight to the bottom part of this cake, which is nice. Looks fantastic. And then finally, we're gonna finish off with one of our purple bags. I've chosen my dark. You can do your light, and anywhere I feel like it needs just a little bit of pop, right? I need it to stand out from the side a little bit. I'm just gonna add an open blossom. So I think I wanna get one in right up there. I've got a little tiny gap. I'm not gonna be afraid of what I've already done. Go. I'm just going to give it some little petals, and generally 2 or 3 is just going to add a little bit of ruffliness, a tiny bit of texture. I might not even do them on every single one. I might just kind of go in here and there, and anywhere I think it needs a little extra purple, it looks like it needs a little detail, a little weight, I'm going to add in those little 2 or 3 petals just to give it that look of a slightly opening bloom. I think I'll pop one in right here, and you can do this with either the light or the dark color. And you can even change it up. You can do it with both. I think maybe one up top, one over there. I'm going to go in right here, and then we'll be done. So you can see we have a beautiful, sweet little design. Nice and easy. It's a great way to practice lines on the side of your cake because it's a little free-flowing. Things don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be evenly spaced. You can see if you get some bumps or hiccups in your lines, it's going to be really easy to cover up once you go back in and put in those lavender buds. Anywhere you get an air bubble, a little wiggle, you can cover it up with a little design detail. So it's a nice, easy step towards decorating on the sides of your cakes because it's really, really free form and beautiful. And we've just added those little open buds anywhere I needed a little texture and dimension or wanted to draw the eye in. And that's a great way to also to draw the attention of anyone looking at your cake away from areas that maybe you don't like or don't feel are perfect. But overall, it's a lovely, simple design, a couple of quick colors, a few bags, and it's easy to practice your piping on the sides of your cake. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.